In 1998, a doctor in Rosario, Argentina, looked at an 11-year-old boy and told his parents the kindest thing he could think of: stop wasting money on football. The boy's body had stopped making a hormone it needed to grow. The fix was a needle in the leg every night, and it cost about $900 a month. His father worked in a steel factory. $900 a month was not a number their family could say out loud. 2 years later, the treatment that saved his career got written down as a promise on a paper napkin. The boy was Lionel Messi, and the story everyone tells about that napkin is a fairy tale. The real story is a lesson about money that took him 20 years and one very public humiliation to finally learn. Rosario, the late 90s. Messi is the smallest kid on every pitch he walks onto, and the best by a distance. The kind of gap that makes grown coaches lean over the fence to watch. Then, around 10, he stops growing. The diagnosis is a growth hormone deficiency. His body isn't making enough of the hormone that tells a child to get bigger. It turns up in roughly 1 child in 10,000, and untreated, the doctors tell his parents he'll stop somewhere near 4'7". Untreated, he stops at 4'7", Mr. Messi. And if we treat him, then he grows. A shot in the leg every night for years, $900 a month. He learns to do the injection himself. A small boy pushing a needle into his own thigh before bed, then again next night, and the next. His father's factory health plan covers it for a couple of years, then runs out. The club promises to step in, then doesn't. So the most gifted footballer of his generation spent his childhood as a medical bill his family couldn't reliably pay. Hold on to that shape, because everything that comes later repeats it. The talent was never the problem. Who pays for it and who owns it? That was always the problem. Now the part you came for. The kid they said would stop at 4'7" grew to 5'7", and became, by most honest measures, the greatest footballer of his generation, and a serious argument for the greatest of all time. A record 8 Ballon d'Ors, the sport's individual crown, more than anyone who has ever played. 4 Champions Leagues, 10 league titles at Barcelona, more goals for a single club than any player on record, and the one that finally closed the argument. December 2022, 35 years old, his last real shot at it. He carried Argentina through a World Cup and lifted the only trophy that had ever slipped through his hands. A country that had waited 36 years stopped breathing all at once. He had won everything the game has to give. Messi is one of the highest paid human beings in the history of team sport. He has earned more from football than almost anyone who ever lived. And for most of that career, he owned none of it. This isn't a video about how good he is at football. You already know that. It's a video about the difference between being paid and being rich, and the exact machinery he used to cross from one to the other. 4 moves. We start with the napkin because the napkin is where he learned the rule. Everything else runs on. Move 1. Back to Rosario. Messi's boyhood club, Newell's Old Boys, knew what they had. His youth team lost 1 match in 4 years and called themselves the Machine of '87. When the diagnosis came, Newell's said they'd cover $900 treatment, and for a while they did. Then the payments came late. Then they came in pesos worth less every month, because Argentina was sliding into the worst financial collapse in its history. Then they stopped. So before he'd earned a single peso from the game, Messi learned something most people don't learn until a contract blows up in their 40s. An institution's promise is only as good as the thing that forces the institution to keep it. Newell's had every intention. Intentions don't buy hormone injections. In 2000, Barcelona flew the family over for a trial. Their sporting director, Carles Rexach, watched him for a few minutes and decided on the spot. But the board dragged, signing a 13-year-old from another continent moving his family, paying for his medicine. It was expensive and strange, and boards hate expensive and strange. Messi's father had run out of patience. Real Madrid was circling. Sign him now, or we fly home tomorrow. Sir, these things take time. The board, the medical bills. Real Madrid didn't ask me for time, so over lunch, with the deal about to die, Rexach asked the waiter for something to write on. All there was a napkin. Then give me the napkin. He wrote the commitment out by hand in blue ink. Barcelona would sign him. Barcelona would pay for the treatment. People love the napkin. It's a father refusing to accept one more promise unless somebody wrote it down and signed it. Move 2, or rather, the mistake that made Move 3 necessary. For 18 years, Messi was the best player Barcelona had ever seen and the best paid. In 2021, a Spanish newspaper printed his contract on the front page, a deal reported to be worth up to 555 million euros across 4 years, the largest contract in the history of team sport. Now watch what happened around that number, because this is the tell. Only a handful of copies existed. One leaked, and investigators later concluded it came from inside the club, from people trying to damage their own best player during a contract fight. Sit with that. The most valuable employee in the building and the people running the building were briefing against him. Because that's what he was. An employee. The most expensive one alive, but an employee. Barcelona had spent years buying players they couldn't afford, borrowing to do it. By the time his deal ran out, the club was so broken that under La Liga's spending rules, they couldn't even register a new contract. We can't sign you, Leo. The league won't let us. I offered to take half. Half still doesn't fit. The math didn't work at any number. So in August 2021, the greatest player alive sat in front of the world's cameras, cried, and left the club he'd spent his life building. And here's the number that matters. He walked out with nothing but the wages he was owed. No stake in Barcelona. No share of the hundreds of millions of shirts sold with his name on them. No cut of the broadcast deals his face sold. No piece of a club whose value multiplied while he was in it. He generated billions. He'd been paid a fortune. Paid, that's the word. He owned none of the thing he built. Income is what they give you for showing up. Ownership is what keeps paying after you leave. At 34, Messi had mastered the first and ignored the second. Move 3. This is where it turns. 2 years later, after a stop at Paris Saint-Germain, Messi's a free agent with 3 offers. Barcelona wants him back. The same spending rules block it again. The second offer is Saudi Arabia, a package reported well over $1 billion, the biggest number ever put in front of an athlete in any sport. It exists because the Saudi state has spent tens of billions buying up global sport to change how the world looks at it, and a Messi signing would be the crown of it. Name your number, Mr. Messi. Whatever it is, we'll beat it. The third offer is Inter Miami, a club that had never won a trophy, playing in a temporary stadium an hour outside the city it's named after. On salary alone, Miami offered a fraction of Saudi Arabia. Miami can't match the money, Leo. I know. Then why Miami? Because Miami's the only one offering me a piece. He said no to the billion and signed with Miami. The football world called it a lifestyle choice, a legend picking the beach. They were reading the salary. They should have been reading the structure. Because the Miami deal wasn't a salary, it was upside. Apple had just bought 10 years of MLS broadcast rights, and as part of bringing Messi in, they gave him a cut of every new subscriber his arrival dragged onto their soccer package. In the month he signed, that package added 300,000 subscribers, pushing it past 1 million. Adidas, who already paid him, agreed to hand him a share of the sales bump his move created. and put out what the league called the fastest selling jersey it had ever seen. And then the part that actually matters, an ownership option, a stake in Inter Miami itself. When he signed, the franchise was worth a fraction of what it is now. He didn't take the biggest check. He took a smaller check and a piece of the thing, then made the thing worth more by walking into it. That's the move he never had at Barcelona. This time, when the value went up, some of it was his. Move 4. Where the money lands decides who keeps it. And Messi learned that one the hard way. The court finds Lionel Andres Messi guilty of tax fraud. In 2016, a Spanish court convicted him and his father. Years of image rights income, routed through shell companies and tax havens, kept out of reach of the Spanish taxman. Around 4 million euros, he got a suspended sentence, a fine, and a very expensive lesson. The structure you build to hold your money isn't a footnote, it's the whole game. So watch what he does with it now. Every one of those streams, the salary, the subscriber cut, the sales share, the equity, the endorsements, doesn't flow into Messi's pocket. It flows into a company he controls. There's a plain reason. Money that lands on a person in Spain is taxed at nearly half. Money that lands in a company at about a quarter. On his numbers, that gap is worth tens of millions a year. And a company can do the one thing a salary never can. It can own things. Underneath that structure sits the machine meant to close the gap between him and the only footballer richer than him. A business that controls his image and commercial rights, and a spread of holdings around it. Property, hospitality, a drink he owns instead of endorses. And football clubs, because he isn't just playing the game now, he's buying pieces of it. A club abroad with an old teammate, small clubs with academies that turn 10-year-olds into assets. Look at what that last one is. Messi, once an 11-year-old a club couldn't afford to keep. Now it's the kind of club that keeps 11-year-olds. He turned himself from the talent into the house. In 2026, Forbes put his net worth at $1.1 billion and finally called him what the headlines had been circling for years. A billionaire. Ronaldo's still ahead. For now. But look at how he got there. He spent the first half of his career being paid, and the second half making sure that when the value shows up, he owns the thing it shows up in. Which brings us back to the napkin. For 20 years, everyone argued about whether Messi or Ronaldo would score more goals. While they argued, Messi quietly stopped being an employee and started being an owner. And the goals were never the thing that would settle it. The 11-year-old already knew the rule. A promise means nothing without a structure behind it. It took a hormone deficiency, a napkin, a leaked contract, and a public goodbye to teach him what to do with it. The boy they said would stop at 4'7" became the greatest of his generation. But that was the easy part. You could see it coming the first time he touched a ball. The hard part was learning, late but not too late, that getting paid and getting rich are two different games. And switching games while everyone thought he was chasing one more trophy. I pull apart the machinery under famous people, not the gossip on top of it. If that's the channel you want, you know what the button does. I'm Capital Detective. The house always wins. This time, the house is him.